Well, happy Thursday to you. Thursday means it's another segment of Tim Talk. And I just wanted to make you aware that today's Tim Talk, as well as the next few Tim Talks, are all going to be addressing the issue of marriage. Well, why is that? Well, February is Valentine's Day. In fact, this coming Sunday is Valentine's Day. So I hope you are ready and you have something for your loved one or loved ones. Also, here at Forks Community Church, we're doing a series on marriage called Tighten the Knot. So for that reason, the next few Tim Talks are going to kind of be addressing some questions and issues that perhaps some of us or maybe all of us struggle with in our marriages from time to time. And so today I want to talk about 2 surefire ways to sabotage your marriage. That's right. 2 surefire ways to sabotage your marriage. So let's jump right into this today. If you want to sabotage your marriage, don't cleave to your spouse. If you want to sabotage your marriage, don't cleave to your spouse. God's design for marriage is to leave and to cleave. That is to leave our families, where we were raised, and to cleave to our spouse. That's the language the Bible uses in Genesis 2:24. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And so, biblically speaking, every new marriage forms a new family. And that new family supersedes former family commitments. And so as a result, once you're married, your main obligation is not to your parents. Your main obligation is to your spouse. Now, here's what that means practically, and I'm sure some of you have dealt with the challenges of leaving and cleaving. Number one, it means that your spouse is now your confidant. It's not your mom or dad or even your children. What about when it comes to the holidays, right? That's always a big issue with couples that were just married. How are we going to spend our holidays, especially Thanksgiving and Christmas? Because you have a husband and wife who each have their own family traditions and celebrations, and now they're coming together. So how are you going to work that out? That's always an issue, right? Well, here's what we need to remember as husbands and wives, that we aren't bound to our parents' traditions, that you're free to choose your own traditions. I love what Tim Keller says in his book, The Meaning of Marriage, that plenty of people have marital problems because they really haven't left home. You failed to leave your parents if you're more driven by your parents' expectations than your spouse's. And he warns that if we rigidly impose those traditions and those patterns that we saw in our own family upon our spouse, then we really haven't left home yet. And so if you don't want to sabotage your marriage, my encouragement to you is to leave home for real, to cleave to your spouse. Now, this next one might hurt a little bit, okay? If you want to sabotage your marriage, then value the relationship that you have with your children more than the relationship you have with your spouse. Here's what we need to remember in marriage, that marriage is the supreme human relationship. The Bible refers to it as a covenant relationship. And so when you are married to your husband or your wife, you become bound to them. You made a promise before God. You made a vow before God that you're going to stick to each other no matter what. But if or when children come along, if you choose to have children, or maybe you have children already, when children come along, that commitment is put to the test, because all the energy and resources that were going into just that marriage relationship is now being diverted to the child or children. And that's natural because children require a lot of time and energy. They are dependent upon us. They need our help for everything initially. And the temptation that can happen once we have children is that we make the relationship with our child or children a covenant relationship, and we treat our relationship with our spouse like a consumer relationship. And what I mean by that is we kind of base our love towards them on feelings alone. And we start thinking, well, hey, I'm doing all this and my spouse isn't reciprocating. Whereas when it comes to children, we just have almost this unconditional love for them, right? And we're pouring out to them, and we're not expecting much in return. But when it comes to our spouse, we really are not operating on that same idea of love with our spouse. As a teenager and even as a young adult, I was always flabbergasted when I heard of couples that were married like 10, 15, or 20 years, like suddenly get a divorce. And I thought to myself, wow, how does that happen? I mean, you've been married that long. It seems like if you made it that long, you can just stick it out for the rest of your life. And so it really got me thinking, how does this happen? Well, now as a pastor and now understanding more about marriage myself, now that I've been married 17 years to Tori, I realize that in some instances that happens because more value was placed on the relationship with the children than on the relationship they had with one another. And what can happen in that instance is when you're valuing the relationship with your children more than a relationship with your spouse, what can happen is when the kids leave home, parents aren't just confronted with an empty nest. They're confronted with the reality of an empty marriage. Well, and that's what is scary. And I want to see you avoid that. I don't want to see you step into these two landmines. And so today, if you recognize, whoa, I am sabotaging my marriage, well, take this as a little hint, a little cue from the Lord to start taking steps to cleave to your spouse and to value the relationship that you have with your spouse more than the relationship you have with your children. Now, I am not saying don't love your children, okay? I would never say that. I want you to love your children, but I am encouraging you to maybe start living with intentionality to prioritize your relationship with your spouse, all right? And I know what it's like. I have 4 kids. We're busy running our kids around, but make time with your spouse. Maybe that just means having some time in the morning before the kids are awake where you're just getting to talk with your spouse. You're not talking about, the logistics of the day. You're just talking to your spouse about, hey, how are you doing today? What sort of things are you looking forward to today? What are the challenges that you're facing today? And maybe doing that at night. I know for my wife, for Tori and I, we try to do that in the morning. We get up early enough. We have our coffee. We kind of take our time to read the Bible and pray, and we talk some together. And likewise, we're able to do that at night. Now, do we do that every single night? No. But those are some of the key moments we have throughout the day to connect where we can prioritize our relationship with one another. So look for those small ways where you can communicate with each other and even serve one another. All right, that's it for today's topic. I hope that this was helpful to you. And let me encourage you to join me next week for next week's Tim Talk, because we're going to address that difficult issue of what do we do when it seems like one spouse is doing all the work and pulling the weight of the marriage, and the other one really is more passive and not as active. What do we do when that happens? So join me next week to find out that answer. And if you missed the first message in our series, Tighten the Knot, we're going to include it in the description below. So look for that link in the description below. We'll see you next week. Thank you for joining me for this week's Tim Talk.